Here we are on the streets in Hilton, a small residential suburb about 3 kilometres from Fremantle. This is a pretty typical West Australian suburb. In the distance over here, and also this house here, are the typical houses that were built here in the 1950s. Timber framed homes, timber floors, pretty low environmental performance. What's typical about Hilton, like so many Perth suburbs, it's going under transformation through a lot of infill type development. This house on the corner here was subdivided into 3 blocks of land. The existing house was retained, and then behind it on each side, small compact brick homes were built. Fantastic for an infill perspective, but from an environmental design perspective and from a sustainable design, pretty poor outcomes.
As David just explained, the standard of houses in Perth and Western Australia is not sustainable at all. So obviously we need innovation to improve this standard.
Yeah. By the way, we are Fabian, Lars and Dennis from Murdoch University, and we research different perspectives on this issue.
Next we're going to see different people from industry talking about what's actually going wrong here in Western Australia.
We've got a problem in Perth. Housing construction seems to be pushing to the boundaries of a lot. We seem to be less concerned with outdoor space, less concerned with garden space, which is creating a cultural problem, I think. You know, we're losing an essence of our culture through our building practice. And I think it's fundamentally driven by people's fear of being outside.
Real estate agents bow to the builders, and the builders, and so the developer bows to the real estate agent. And that's the problem that we have these days. They want to make it all nice and simple for everyone, for themselves, too simple.
Our population's growing exponentially, but unfortunately it's growing exponentially in a design system that's not designed to be sustainable. You know, we pump out one of our most valuable resources, our sewerage, we pump out into oceans. We produce energy that we pipe, that we pump around to all these residential communities and cities and so forth out of coal, because it's simple and it's easy and it's cheap. But the reality is it's not cheap for the environment. There's a very exciting future, but we've got to embrace it, and we've got to embrace it quickly. Time is of the essence, because we're burning this planet up at a rate that it can't continue to tolerate. And if we don't change quickly, we're in trouble.
As you have seen, the status quo is not satisfying at all, so we went to different people's sites to see better examples about sustainable housing. Next we're going to see David, who is explaining about his site.
Yep, you're on.
What we're aiming to achieve on this property is a form of urban infill that's quite different from the standard residential or strata subdivision, which is so common in Western Australia. We've got the existing house over here in the distance. That home has 2 core living areas which can allow for different demographic groups. Here is the main studio. 2 people can comfortably live within this space. And over here, we are building another smaller compact shed type studio. This is an infill product that allows for a lot of interaction on this piece of land, whilst retaining all the existing vegetation. Some of the main features in here are the solar orientation. It's oriented to the north, so it's going to get as much winter sun coming in at this lower level and also at the loft level. All the windows are double glazed, well insulated. The roof will have a double layer of insulation, as well as the walls. The concrete slab is polished concrete. You can't see it, it's got a grout over the top right now. Polished concrete is fantastic for solar design, because as the winter sun comes in, it will heat up the concrete and it will stabilise the internal temperature. One of the unique features of the construction of this building is reverse brick veneer. which is not very common in Western Australia. Reverse brick veneer aims to get the thermal mass to the internal walls and a lightweight cladding externally. This is the internal wall. Like the concrete slab, it has a high thermal mass, so as the building warms up in winter, it will stabilise the internal temperature. Externally, we can look at the layers here. Behind this insulation here is the brick. We now have a dense R2.5 insulation batt between the timber frame stud-work. Over the top of this is a breathable membrane to stop any moisture penetrating and to also slow the airflow. We then cover the membrane with a timber batten to create an airspace, and then over the top of that is the cladding. In this case, we're using a fibre cement panel, mainly for the type of look that we wanted. On other walls, we might use metal, or at the entrance, we used a timber product.
We've just seen David with this on-site wall construction, and next we went to a company which is called iSmart, who builds factory houses which have high thermal efficiency.
For steel frame as you see it, the timber frame, which is a 170 timber stud, the insulation, which is 2 layers of R2, our internal air tightness membrane, our external breather membrane. These materials, like we said, they're manufactured in Germany. If you build a building in Germany, you expect it to be there in 100 and 150 years' time. And these materials ensure that, and as long as they're applied properly, that's the result they get. So the buildings that we build last a long, long time. Then outside the membrane, then we have battens again to fix any sort of cladding. You can see there's a range of claddings here. It can be literally anything. If you really want a brick on the outside of your building, we can put a brick on the outside of the system. We'd rather not, but any sort of cladding, any sort of aesthetic, any sort of finish, textured, rendered finishes, whatever you want.
The 5 main components is thermal insulation, thermal bridge-free construction, so putting onto the steel our foam insulation that has a higher thermal rating than our fiberglass. And this thickness has the same thermal performance than the fiberglass, so we have no thermal bridge. Then the next one is the glazing, the windows, the high-performing windows, because they are our heaters of the buildings in the winter time. And on the other hand, they have to keep the heat out in the summertime because we always want to get light in. So that's the next one. Then the air tightness of the building and the ventilation system. And the ventilation system is a heat recovery or energy recovery ventilation system. So it means by extracting the air out of the building and getting the new fresh air into the building, there's a heat exchange happening. The overall energy consumption is reduced by 70%, and the heating and cooling is reduced by 90%.
After visiting the guys of iSmart, we went to another building site and we met Ben. And Ben is a builder who is pretty interested in using local materials for building houses. And let's ask him what is the meaning of sustainability for him.
Sustainable housing, in essence, for me, comes back to a use of local materials. To reduce the amount of embodied energy on a building site, we need to use what's available to us in the local area. In this case, we're using limestone because we're actually standing on a limestone hill. In other locations, if you're in the forest, obviously you would use wood. If you've got stone in the area, you would build with stone. And in this case as well, we're using recycled material as well. So we've changed the design of this area, and the waste product that we removed from the initial design, we've now incorporated into the structure of the wall. This maintains a reuse philosophy and respects the embodied energy of the material that we often call waste, because in essence, there is no such thing as waste. It's just stuff in the wrong place. There's so much value in waste material, or what we think is waste material, that what we need to do, I think, is change the philosophy of how we construct. If we believe something to have value, then it will have value. But if we believe it not to have value, then we'll see it as waste and we'll dispose of it. The deck is constructed out of a Wandu timber, which was recycled from the owner of this property's original house that he lived in. When that house was demolished, he got the wood, and then we've used this wood as part of his deck. There's always a story, in a way, behind material, and I think we need to acknowledge that and tell the story of the material as much as the space that we create.
A critical piece of any type of construction is the type of materials that we use. What I've aimed to do here is bring as many recycled materials into this building as possible. This wall here is all recycled red brick from a friend's house who did a major renovation. All of these bricks that are built for the internal wall are standard bricks for new residential housing. All of these have been salvaged off building construction sites, bricks that would have been destined to landfill. They were all brought here and have been reused or repurposed, if you like, for this building. Some of the other features, an old Jarrah beam out of my uncle's old workshop, kept this for 20 years, finally now getting used. Upstairs in the loft, I'll put down a Jarrah floorboards, which will be all recycled. This balustrading that you see up here was from a salvage yard. The brick paving that we're doing out here on the northern end are all recycled bricks, the same as the internal wall, saved from landfill. And finally, we're putting a solar pergola out here, all from salvaged Jarrah timber.
We try and get as many of our products as possible locally, and we do where it is possible, but there are certain elements that just aren't available outside countries like Germany, so we have to import them to be able to ensure the quality.
Sustainable housing is not just about how we build the house, but also how we use it. Don is going to explain us what he thinks about that.
As the family changed, the house would change. So we weren't fixed to that one house. You know, it's like when you're, and I don't think a lot of us think about it that way, but like, you know, when you're young, you don't want to live in a house because it's too much bloody maintenance and you can't party enough. So an apartment or a flat is the best thing to move into. Buy yourself a one bedder or with a couple of mates, a two bedder, and then, you know, you grow up, you get married, you have a family, and it's good for the kids to have some space to run around in. You know, so you get the house with a little bit of land around it, and then as the kids get older, they move out, then you move also. And we don't think about doing that. You know, it's so easy to go through and change our environment where we're living as your family group changes. Or it could go the other way and you go to a co-generational house.
Don talked about the possibility of co-generational houses, and we also went to Tim and Shani, a couple who implemented a similar system which is based on dividing a house into several flats, because obviously there's no need for only two people sharing a huge house. So let's have a look at them.
Well, I think our kind of motivations actually began in twofold. One was an interest in climate change and also the issues of peak oil. And then David Holgram talked about how a suburb might kind of retrofit itself for that. And really that lecture has been the kind of template for everything that we've done ever since. So he described a street where 4 houses knocked the walls down between those 4 houses, and one was the veggie garden, one was the animal area, one was kind of the communal living area, and one was kind of an orchard. And that idea really sparked my interest, because it was actually not moving out into the country or going somewhere else, but it was staying where you were in your local community and really building what you could have in a country area by thinking smaller and working together with the people around you.
So far we've seen a couple of individual projects here in Perth, but there's also a bigger project in the southwest of Australia which is called the Ridgecliff project, and let's talk to Mike. What's going on over there?
They've never seen anything like it before. You know, wastewater treatment on site, renewable energy, everyone with a rainwater tank instead of having a scheme water connection, community gardens, how strata, how's this going to work and how's it going to be managed. So there's been a huge amount. The objective with this project is to basically be 100% self-sufficient in renewable energy, 100% self-sufficient in water from rainwater on site, and both at a household catchment level as well as in a stormwater catchment in these dams, and to then have very solar passive energy efficient homes, and then for the community to be able to actually grow its own food as well. So.
Mike just mentioned renewable energy and water systems. Let's have a look at Tim and Shani, who've already implemented these at their house.
So we've got 2.5 kilowatts facing east, 2.5 kilowatts facing north, and 2.5 kilowatts facing west, which means rather than getting one big peak if they're all on the north, we get 3 peaks coinciding. So effectively we get the maximum production from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun goes down. So on a really good day we might make between 42 and 45 kilowatt hours, which is pretty good. So over the year I think we're pretty much break even. The amount of energy we use for what's effectively 5 households is provided by the solar panels, more or less anyway. Speaking of water, we've got a 50,000 litre rainwater tank in, so we've got 4 water systems. We've got rainwater, grey water, bore water and mains, and effectively we could probably be almost off mains, although that's not really an aspiration. We have a bore that does most of the veggie gardens, the grey water that does the fruit trees and some of the fodder crops.
So using different water systems for irrigation for food production?
Yeah, so this is what it's all about. So if you're going to have street trees, they may as well be avocados, or oranges, or pears, or some streets we need deciduous trees, and so we don't overshadow houses, and on the north-south streets we'll be running evergreens. So you can just produce such an abundance of food within a village that we can feed the village.
This is the veggie garden. What we've aimed to do here is have everything as productive as we possibly can. It's not set up in that typical kind of permaculture way. The systems are probably not as integrated as they could be, but I kind of call it a mixture of a permaculture garden and a market garden. And we went that way because we wanted maximum food production.
Now we talked about building houses, using systems in houses and the backyard as garden. But Don, what about the roof space?
That's one thing we don't use, and I think that's what we have to start thinking about also, because the roof space has got your sunlight. You can have your gardens up there, you can have your, depending on the house or the project, that's a space we're not using. And so trying to think, how can we make that roof usable and work as the fabric of the building is a very important thing also. It's the maintenance cost of having a roof space that you used. How can we make it watertight, thermally perform, we can do it easily, but it's the water tightness and the long-term maintenance of it we need to start thinking about and using. But yeah, I think the roof's great, You have your pergola on the roof there, and you've got the solar panels on your pergola. There's just, you're generating a bit of energy there, Yeah. I think it's a good idea.
So far we have heard about different ideas of sustainability, but why is it not common to use it?
I think it's education. It's not there in the media every day of the week that people see something about sustainability. It's not being spelt out to them in a way that they can understand. That's why, I think when we're building houses, if someone said to them, look, yeah, this house is $10,000 more because you've got the solar panels on it, but actually that's going to save you $50,000 over 20 years or 15 years. But it's not there in black and white that people can easily read, I understand affordability has to be considered, but then, yeah, it is education, and I don't know who's responsible for that at the end of the day, but unfortunately the decision makers today don't have that level of education or won't have that level of education. So we either do it through media or government.
So what is the actual problem, and should the government change the standards maybe again?
Like if the regulation is that low, everybody can build to this low standard, and they're competing in this low standard. If the standards would be high, and if they would be, say, like in Europe, we're going now for this standard, passive house, nearly zero energy living, you maybe heard of that. That's 2020, that's getting regulation in the EU. And if everybody has to build to this standard, you can't go lower any longer. And if that is the standard, then you're able to compete on that market.
So the politicians are starting to look at it. The issue is that everyone's being told that it costs money to go to those extra stars. But what's it save? No one's telling you how much it saves. So there is that, I think there is that sort of break-even point, one could say, where that extra cost, in effect, doesn't affect your mortgage because of the money you're saving. And so that has to be explained to the consumer. And they're and that's where government should be looking at it.
An example to save money would be the concept of iSmart, which already reduces the total energy consumption by 70%.
And that's the first step, because if you need now a solar system that is only 30% of the one that you needed before, and the storage again needs to be smaller, then you're really winning.
And there are even other alternatives to save money.
Even with, I've told some developers, why don't you advertise the benefit of living next to a train station? Because you may only require one car instead of two cars. That one car that you don't have is $10,000 to $12,000 a year of dollars that you don't spend. Over 10 years, that's $120,000 off your mortgage. How much, that's maybe reduced your payback period by 20% also, 25%. We should be telling people those benefits, but it's not there. No one's saying that in the paper. You don't see it advertised. I only need one car, you save $10,000 a year. As I said, they're the things we should be doing. We should be advertising and marketing, but they're not doing that. They don't think about it that way. They're still thinking of that dollar at the end of the day, and not the benefits to the person that's going to be living there.
Well, that was pretty interesting so far. The next sequences are about what we should do from now on to live more sustainable in a better future.
Housing generally in Western Australia, I think it's really difficult. It's a big battle to try and beat the project builders over here. I think there is a way, and I've got this idea of building a home using partially factory-built timber frame construction in the factory, and so doing a project home without a project builder. So basically getting the architect designed, and using the owner as the owner-builder, and he engages a supervisor or project manager to assist them build the house. And so the profit margin again is no longer there in the equation, and then that way they're able to improve the sustainability.
People want to see this, they want to see change, they want to see sustainable change. How can we live sustainably? Is it even possible in the Western world for us to live sustainably? People have started to lose hope. The reality is, yes, we can. We haven't got too many people, even though we have way too many people under our current, design in our society. However, if we live along these lines, we don't have too many people. We consume too much of stuff that's not consumed, that's not produced sustainably. But if we come back to a simpler life, where we've got more time to do the things we enjoy doing, and we grow our food and we produce our energy off our roofs and our rainwater from our tanks and our roofs again, and the reality is that we can live sustainably.
My belief is that we should be minimising the footprint of a house. And if we want a larger house, then we should go down and up, but then maintain a large area for garden, for large trees, for vegetable gardens, for places for kids to play, whether it be a tree house or kicking the footy in the backyard. We're losing an essence of our culture through our building practice.
I think at the moment a lot of people are keen to build up, get a second story. I reckon going down would be more useful, because then you get more thermal efficiency without problems of overlooking, and I think it's going to get hotter as things go on, so probably better going underground than higher up. And I think the main thing is at the moment Australia's got the most overbuilt houses in the world, and at the same time we've got all sorts of other issues like social isolation. I think really what we need to be doing is looking at how to live collaboratively. For instance, here we have one laundry, so we got maybe 5 persons or couples with one laundry on. What's the point in having 5 laundries? So basically what I think we need to do is how to live more collaboratively and recognise that people are essentially social animals and like to be around other people. So rather than building a huge house that there's only going to be 1 or 2 people rattling around in, might as well share the space and share the resources. That's my thought.
We need to be outside. The indigenous people of this country have been living outside in many ways for 40,000 years. I don't know why we don't get it.
Brief a quote by Einstein: "You don't solve problems by doing things the same way. You know, you've got to change your thinking to change things."
And dogs. I think dogs are really important. Everyone needs a dog, and that way, you know, your housemates aren't around, then you can cuddle one. Hey, Jackal! Hey, Jackal!